Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Access to Insight from the Jewish Community Foundation on famine, food access, and food waste. We are delighted to have you all with us, and we'll get going with the substance of the program in just a few seconds. But first, I wanted to share a couple of announcements. So first of all, and just tell you a little bit more about the Jewish Community Foundation as well. So JCF is committed to building flourishing Jewish communities and advancing sustainable, just, and vibrant societies in San Diego, across the country, and across the world, as well as in Israel. We have facilitated $1.8 billion in grants into those communities over the last half century, and just in the last 20 years, JCF donors have granted $659 million specifically to Jewish organizations. We currently manage over $750 million in assets for individuals, families, and institutions. We believe every individual has the power to make the difference, and that together we can change the world. I wanted to draw attention really quickly to the San Diego Jewish Community Study. The last time that a study was completed of the Jewish community in San Diego was 19 years ago in 2003, and it no longer offers an accurate assessment of today's Jewish community. While San Diego has a vibrant and seemingly growing Jewish community, we lack meaningful current data to inform organizational decision-making. So JCF, along with the partners on screen, have formed a collaborative community study leadership team and hired the Brandeis University and NORC at the University of Chicago to conduct the Jewish Communal Study. If you receive a letter, phone call, or email asking you to participate in the community study, please take the time to complete it by September 23rd, as it will ensure that your interests are heard and represented as we together support the next chapter for the San Diego Jewish community. If you're interested in learning more, please visit sdjewishblueprint.org, and we'll put that link in the chat. Next, please sign up by October 1st for Jewish Women Invest for Better, a monthly 6-part series in collaboration with the Jewish Women's Foundation and JCF for women to come together in a comfortable environment to learn and share their stories around money and investing, whether challenges, successes, or just plain avoidance. Each session will focus on a different aspect of investing and will include a relevant Jewish teaching and include plenty of time for sharing and discussion. Sessions will be facilitated by Janet Ashertel and Beth Cyril. For more information, please reach out to Sarah Schatz, whose contact information we will put into the chat. And lastly, we're also happy to share the success of our homelessness initiative called Give4. Give4 is JCF's effort to encourage everyone in San Diego to participate in big local challenges, and we started with homelessness. Give4 makes it giving impactfully much simpler, helps educate donors on the complex issues and tell the stories of the nonprofits taking aspects on different aspects of homelessness. Since we launched, we have seen over 1.35 million and growing in impact. And we are happy to share that coming soon, we're going to be launching our second Give4 fund, which is locally focused on climate solutions, local climate solutions here in San Diego. It's a great entryway to learn more about this complicated issue and to start participating in some local actionable solutions in our own community. If you're interested in learning more, just reach out to hello@give4.org, or feel free to put your name in the chat and we will reach out to you. You can be among the first to know. So let's move on to today's program. I am delighted to introduce our moderator, Aviva Paley. Aviva, before becoming the Chief of Staff for the National Young Farmers Coalition, where she works today, Aviva was previously the co-founder and senior director of Kitchens for Good, a San Diego-based nonprofit whose innovative apprenticeship training programs tackle issues of food waste, hunger, poverty, and recidivism. Aviva grew Kitchens for Good from a startup into an award-winning nonprofit with 40 staff that's helped 20,000 San Diegans gain access to nutritious food and supported 400 job seekers launch meaningful careers. Because Aviva works at the intersection of sustainability and economic justice in the food system and is passionate about fostering a just and livable community in San Diego, I can't think of a more perfect person to lead this amazing panel today. So Aviva, over to you.
Thank you, Ollie. Hello, everyone. It's really nice to see some familiar faces in the participant pool. Hello, my name is Aviva Paley, and I use she, her pronouns. And we're here today to learn about local and national issues of food access, food waste, and food insecurity. Food insecurity is a public health crisis that affects millions of people in the United States on a daily basis and costs billions of dollars in education and healthcare annually. We're in a time of unusual disruption to our food chains in America and around the world. These have been exacerbated by war, the pandemic, and climate change. But the reality is that food insecurity in America has been a growing problem for decades. And COVID-19 really just helped to amplify this serious problem. In 2019, nearly 10% or 1 in 10 Americans experienced food insecurity. And by September 2020, that number more than doubled to 25% who are unable to acquire enough food to meet their needs or were uncertain of where their next meal comes from. In San Diego, this includes nearly 1 million people. Simultaneously, between 35 to 40% of food produced in the United States is going to waste. And when food is wasted, so are all of the resources that went into producing it, like the water, the fertilizer, labor needed to grow that food and deliver it. So the stakes for solving these interconnected issues are very high, with our community and environmental and public health hanging in the balance. So today we're going to discuss approaches to tackling these really massive problems, moving between different lenses from a micro to a macro level. And we're going to learn about steps that we can all take on an individual basis to make a difference in food insecurity and food waste in San Diego. And we're going to learn about different parts of our regional food system and how they intersect with each other. So we have an all-star panel to help us navigate these issues today, including Abby Liebman, the president and CEO of Mazon, a Jewish response to hunger. We have Ellie Brown, co-executive director of the San Diego Food Systems Alliance. Welcome, Ellie. And we have Jessica Topp, the executive director of the Solana Center for Environmental Innovation. I thank you so much, panelists, for joining us for this discussion. I want to acknowledge upfront that we have a very ambitious agenda, and we have there's a lot of complexity to these issues, and there's many parts of the world and our nation that are suffering from these issues. And we could devote an entire series of sessions on these topics, but we're not trying to diminish the global issues, but we're going to be focusing today on domestic issues because we believe that that's where Jewish Community Foundation stakeholders can have an outsized impact through a better understanding of the complex issues in our own backyard. So, welcome, panelists. So by way of introduction, I'd like to start by thinking through a little bit of the causes of food insecurity. And it's really puzzling how in the richest country on earth, we have nearly 1 in 10 who are food insecure. And I'm curious if you can share a little bit more about what the cause is. Is this that there's not enough healthy food to go around, or is this a challenge of access, inability to afford the food, ineffective distribution? So I'll pass it to Ellie first.
Thank you, Aviva. Thank you, Jewish Community Foundation, for having me on the panel today. I'm excited to be here. So the work of the San Diego Food System Alliance, we conducted a research process and a deep participatory process to create a common agenda for our food system in San Diego County called San Diego County Food Vision 2030, pretty recently, the last couple years. And really the first goal of Food Vision 2030 is to cultivate justice, particularly racial justice, because in the research, we have found that when we look across the food system, the data across the food system, access to resources connected to our food system is really divided along racial lines due to history of oppression, whether it's access to healthy food, access to capital, land, housing, business ownership. The data is really clear. There is a significant racial inequity issue. So for me and for us, it's really about access to resources and how the system is designed now today. And not by intention necessarily, but really the outcome of the history. And so it's really about setting the right intention. And the truth is that the dominant economic system really was not designed to be fair and equitable for all communities, and our industrialized food system is deeply connected to our dominant economic system. And it doesn't value sovereignty, ability for each community to make its own decisions about the food sources and how the system is designed. Famine globally, I would say in many ways is connected to the same dominant forces that's creating conflict and climate change, as well as a dominant economic system. And women and children, particularly people of color, are often the ones that are most impacted. So really it's access and system design in my mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. Abby, I'll turn it to you to talk a little bit about how you see the causes.
So Mazona Jewish Response to Hunger mission is to address hunger and its causes in the United States and Israel. And I agree very much with what Ellie just said, that it's actually a choice. Although I will say that in the current situation, we begin to wonder about whether or not there actually will be food shortages. I mean, certainly globally, we're seeing the impact of what happens when Russia invaded Ukraine and really destroyed a huge part of the grain distribution in the world, on which many countries, certainly in Europe, are relying. In our work, we actually believe in many ways, the way Jews often do, that it's really important to remember our history and to remember it in a way where we learn from it. So we are launching a virtual hunger museum at the end of this year, which will trace this country's response to hunger, both what caused it, what it looked like from the Gilded Age, it's about 1918, to the current time. And for us, it's really important that we address how our government responded. Why? Because again, as Jews, we understand from Torah that we have an obligation as a community to care for those, to provide security to those who struggle in America. And there's no community that is able to do this all alone. That we look at what our community is writ large in the United States, and that would be our federal government. That is a reflection of who we are. It reflects both our priorities and the values that underlie those priorities. And so we look to the federal government, and we always have in this country, as being the place that has the power and the means to address vulnerabilities in America. Now, whether or not, Ellie, that there's a systemic problem with the social economic structures of the United States, sort of beyond the scope of Mazone and certainly in this conversation, I think. I don't want to go down that road if I don't have to. I'm just a chicken sometimes. But the notion that there's an individual response that can independently address these issues is something that our country doesn't really embrace. That isn't really the way we can do this. So this is really talking about systemic change, and the systemic change happens through policy, and that policy has to be rooted in how do we lift up all Americans. And I will say finally that With the White House conference coming, the notion of intersectionality between issues has been surfaced. The structure of the conference and the way it's being approached concerns us a little bit that the hard questions will not be addressed because there are conflicts here, that the ideas behind making certain that everyone in America has enough nutritious food is a valuable ideal, but to turn and say that it is those people who are struggling with food insecurity that have to lead the way on this and will be circumscribed in ways that the rest of America is not an appropriate response to this, right? We don't experiment on poor people. But if we think about the idea that there are people who will always be food insecure. So ending hunger in America is not the fact that no one will ever be hungry again, in the idea that they won't become hungry, but we can keep them from being hungry, right? Most seniors who age into poverty are not suddenly going to go out and find a job and get themselves to be self-sufficient. They're going to need help. They always will. People with challenges such as disability or inadequate support. We think about LGBT seniors those who age now did not have any kind of rights or opportunities to secure pensions and family supports that all of us can take for granted. That when we think about what's happened to tribal nations in this country, that it will be decades before we can restore that which we destroyed. And so I don't ever want people to walk away thinking, oh, great, if we just did X, we can end hunger. There is no way to do that. What we really need is an idea that addresses where those needs are and a system that supports people through so they get that lift up that they need. And those many people that will transition off from that security blanket, if you will, I'm not crazy about net at this point, too many holes, that's what the system is designed to do, but it has to be designed for both.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think we're going to dive later into kind of the differences between some of these ways that we need to provide immediate support as well as systems change. But it's clear hearing from both of you that this is not an issue of there not being enough food to go around in the United States, that this is a much deeper issue stemming from lack of access, people not having the money, resources to be able to buy that food, which ties into many other systemic issues of poverty, inequality. So as we think through, this huge need for food, we simultaneously have this other side, but also connected side to this coin around food waste. So for Jessica, could you share, why is there so much food waste? What causes this issue and what are the impacts of it?
Oh, great connection. Thank you. Yes, so we at Solana Center really look at it as a systemic, a whole system issue. If we look at the amount of food waste, as you mentioned earlier, nationwide, as much as 40% of food actually doesn't make it from production to the plate. And so how is that? Is there an issue of not having actually enough food? In our region, we discard 500,000 tons of food every year. And if you look at what portion of that might be edible, surely we are discarding enough that we could feed those in need. So without getting into necessarily what my organization does, some of the other things to think about are, and the reason that Solana Center, our focus is really on environmental and climate change issues. The reason that we're concerned with it is that as much as 20%, when organic material ends up in the landfill, it off gases at a very potent rate. And as much as 20% of California's emissions are coming from organic material in landfills. So there's recent legislation at the state level that just became active in January 1st of this year to keep organic material from going to the landfill. That also identifies when working with businesses, we need to identify edible foods that could be rescued. And so that's an important component of it. But the greenhouse gases that are generated from organic material going to landfill is an enormous issue. So we're really looking at closing that loop. Why are we generating so much food that ends up? So a lot of that is going to be behavior changes and education that needs to take place. And I'll say one more thing along these lines, which is if we continue with the non-regenerative practices that we use today for farming, for agricultural practices, and you probably know this already, but we only have 60 years of farmable land left. And so how does that play into food waste? Well, when you harvest produce from the soil, you're actually mining minerals and nutrients, which is what makes it nutritious for us to eat. But if you discard that material inappropriately, like in the landfill, its value is gone. And so that's why we are in particular a very big proponent of composting, where you recapture, recycle in effect that material and put it back on the soil. Because back to that 60 years of farmable land, if we keep depleting our soils, we're not going to have I mean, we've got even a bigger problem than the hunger problem that we have today. So I will pass it back to you, but I'm excited to be here and talk about these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. It's really so astonishing to hear the profound impact on greenhouse gas emissions and climate change that food waste has. I think it's often a little known fact about how interconnected that is. Ellie, I know that the Food System Alliance also works closely on food waste, so I'm wondering if there's anything you'd like to add here of the interconnection.
Yeah, thank you so much. Would this be an appropriate moment to share a few slides about our work, or this be coming up?
Yeah, so great segue. I mean, the next kind of question to everyone is telling us a little bit about the changes your organization would like to bring about and how people can help, not just from a financial perspective, but also how they can get involved, practical steps, mindset, advocacy to support these issues. So go ahead, Ellie.
Thank you. Yeah, we work with Solana Center very closely. Recently, we had a contract to work on a multi-city project around food waste prevention. And as Jessica had, I'm sorry, I'm like trying to present this. As Jessica had alluded, the issues around the food system are really interconnected. So this is really the reason why this vision was created. San Diego County Food Vision 2030 was created through a 2-year process recently through the pandemic, engaging with over 3,000 individuals and over 250 organizations, and really excited and proud of the fact that most of the individuals that we engaged with in the process were individuals from communities in San Diego County that are food insecure, worker communities, small farmers, small fishermen, really those communities that are struggling to survive in the dominant industrialized food system that we have. And really the vision itself is framed up in 3 goals and 10 objectives: cultivate justice, fight climate change, and build resilience. So this issue of food is very interconnected. Environmental justice, social justice, just cannot separate any of this. And and the 10 objectives under the 3 goals are the most impactful objectives that will help achieve the 3 goals. And preventing food waste is objective 7. And so we have many objectives that we're trying to achieve. And the way we're doing it is really through a broad network of organizations and advocates coming together. So trying to collaborate with as many folks as possible to under this common united agenda. And I just also want to share the impact of our food system from not just from an equity issue lens, but from an economic lens. Our food system employs the most number of individuals in San Diego County, 15%. And I think another fact is that a lot of these workers are those folks that are food insecure, those in the fields, those in the kitchen. So but there's also a lot of opportunity, $35 billion of economic output through our food system in San Diego. So we always say, okay, imagine a system that is even more local, even more sustainable, even more efficient, even more equitable, how much of an impact we could have in our region. And if I can make this work, instead of me talking, I just really want everyone to hear from the voices of leaders in our network and our communities around the issues of the food system we're trying to address. So I'm going to try, but please let me know, Rachel, if it doesn't work. I'm gonna try, but please give me a holler.
There's no sound, Ellie. Would you like me to share it?
Is it not working?
Mm-mm.
Did that help when I muted it?
Yes.
Okay.
We can't hear it.
Oh, no sound. Okay.
There we go. If you want to start it from the beginning, now we can hear it.
Oh, you can hear it now?
Now we can.
Okay, let me know.
It's not coming through consistently. Why don't we try sharing it ourselves?
Of course, is to get food to the people that really needs the food and still make money and a living as a farmer.
Soil is the foundation for life, for nutritious food.
Y sí, habemos muchas personas que no sabemos de dónde viene la comida. La comida viene de la agricultura y específicamente todo viene de la tierra.
Food, as an immigrant, food is essential in our culture as a way to celebrate, as a way to communicate, as a way to grieve, as a way to just come together as family, as friends.
We were suggesting that things were wrong and we needed to do something different and that we needed to have a better relationship with food. So growing our own food was something maybe we should look at doing.
There's too few people that look at socially disadvantaged communities and see all of the amazing work and the structure that exists to mobilize. That is more valuable than any physical infrastructure that we could build. You know, we just have to figure out how to empower it.
In these last generations, we've kind of lost that connection. Even as tribal people, we're just like other Americans, and you go to the supermarket thinking you're buying healthy food for your family, and you figure out it's loaded with sugar and it's loaded with all these other things. So we're in that same mindset of changing, but we're not afraid of that change.
How do we democratize the food economy in San Diego County? How do we invest in community wealth building models? Things like land trusts, things like cooperatives, things like employee ownership. So these are ways that we might be able to invest in creating a better food system that actually supports the people and the workers and the people that are on the receiving end of it.
Thank you, Ellie. So that we can get to the other panelists, I'm curious if you could quickly address before passing it off. This video did such a great job at, sharing the huge complexity of the food system. And sometimes it's so complex that as individuals, we really, it's hard to figure out how as individuals we can make a difference. So what is your message to community members in terms of how they can address specifically some of these issues of food access and food waste and our food system?
Yeah, I'd like to also make a quick plug for Project New Village, which is, so the Black woman that you saw speaking, managing director of Project New Village, Miss Diane Moss, she is one of our network leaders. And in the email, you saw that we would be highlighting Project New Village. They are one of our network partners, but I think it's important as San Diegans to know about different communities in San Diego County. This is a community, Southeast San Diego, primarily Black, Hispanic individuals, and they're doing amazing work. And in particular, I was asked to highlight this because it's such a visible, tangible impact in our food system. And this is a mixed use development project they're working on right now. And they just actually acquired this land, which is incredible that they were able to acquire this land. And this new project, it's called the Community Food Hub. And essentially, they're going to be having a retail site as well as a community kitchen and different type of entrepreneurial activities to support not only with healthy food access, but also community wealth building. It is a project that is centered around self-determination and food justice. Really excited about this project, so I just wanted to highlight it. It's 12,000 square foot facility, and now they're really looking to build out this $8 million project. So it's incredible what folks in our community are doing. So I just wanted to highlight it. And lastly, as sort of a call to action, ways to get involved, we do have a membership program, and we'll be launching policy campaigns, priorities around Food Vision 2030. So that really is the best way to get involved, sdfsa.org. Of course, we as individuals can take action buying local, reducing food waste, and ensuring that we're also being connected to the earth, planting things. But as a member, you get a discount to our Food Vision 2030 annual gathering on September 29th at the Center for Arts Escondido, 25% off. It's a gathering with other leaders coming together around food system issues. So that's the end of my spiel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellie. I'll see you at the gathering and highly recommend it for anyone interested in digging deeper into these food systems issues. I'd like to pass it to Abby to share a little bit about, you mentioned in your intro what changes you want to bring about. So how does Mazone work on those changes, and how can people get involved to support those kind of changes?
Thanks. So Mazone is an advocacy organization. We work for systemic change through policy change. And that means that we believe in democracy. And I would like to suggest a couple of things that I think are important grounding for the conversation we're having. So one of them is that the charitable food system, which is really where the direct service aspects of our national response to hunger are nested, means more that this is where you have food banks, which are really big wholesale warehouses that distribute food to food pantries, which then in turn distribute food to individuals. It serves a vital function in the way in which our response to hunger in the United States is currently crafted. That is that the primary vehicle through which people get get some benefits that they can use to buy food is through the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, which is SNAP. It used to be called food stamps. And it typically is enough to carry you through the first 3 weeks of the month. And then for the last week of the month, you don't have enough money to feed yourself and your family. So that's where the charitable food system steps in and really can fill those gaps. There's a lot of challenges there about timing and opportunity to go, et cetera, because there's not enough to feed everybody. There are also people who are not eligible for SNAP, like people who are enter this country without documents and therefore are not eligible for many federal programs, including SNAP. We, as a part of a national network of advocacy organizations, some focused exclusively on hunger, as we are, some broader based. Our role is to elevate the deficiencies in these systems and to try to get our government to be responsive to redressing those gaps or problems or barriers, et cetera. But for Mazone, we created a niche for ourselves that we felt was really important in the landscape of anti-hunger work. And that is that we look at those populations in America that struggle with food insecurity, but are either underrepresented or unaddressed by other national hunger advocates. So for us, the centerpiece of this work and where it started was work we did around hunger among currently serving military families. And we then moved to include veterans, and now we do work with tribal nations, and we do work with single mothers and their children, something I think Ellie also referenced. And we are concerned about seniors overall, but more important, LGBT seniors, because again, these are groups that are not getting attention from other advocates, let alone our federal government. And then finally, Puerto Rico, which is America, but not treated quite like Americans. So these are challenges that require policy changes. And we do believe very strongly in democracy still. That means that our work is about getting Americans to engage in lawmaking in this country, because that's technically how it's supposed to go. And in many cases, that is how it goes. That we offer opportunities to connect with and communicate on specific policy change to those with the power to make that change. Some of this we do at the state level, by the way, because there's opportunity there that may not exist at the federal level at this moment. But at this time, we are looking at the 2023 Farm Bill. The Farm Bill is something, I mean, I've been engaged as an advocate in the social justice sector for my entire political career, most of it centered on women's rights. And I'd never heard of the Farm Bill. So I always assume most people, I just think everybody's like me. So I just assume most people do not know a lot about the Farm Bill, which is a massive piece of legislation that Congress has to entertain every 5 years. It covers issues about forests and waterways and agricultural production and farming and the ways in which food systems operate in America. I mean, it's huge, it's unfathomable. And the largest title by financial input is the nutrition title, which is where all of the primary safety net programs in this country that deal with food insecurity are governed. And it is a massive bill. And this is where we anticipate that there will be a tax on the SNAP program to try to circumscribe it. There are already work requirements in there, even though this program was never devised to be an employment program. So in order to get food stamps, you must either have a job that is paying you so poorly that you still qualify financially, or be actively looking for a job. And if you don't get a job within 3 months, if you are an able-bodied adult without dependents, you cannot get any more food stamps, period. You're off the program. In a time when there's been a great deal of discussion about our economy and recessions, et cetera, you really have to shake your head and wonder what is going to happen to a huge portion of people who are currently food insecure. I think that the challenges for us is that we want to bring greater flexibility to this program. And what I want to say finally is that during the pandemic, the Biden administration enacted temporary measures and went to Congress so that Congress enacted temporary extensions and expansions of the safety net in this country. And guess what happened? Food insecurity not only remained stable at a time when the possibility of the numbers were that they would double from 35 million people to 60 million or more. In those first weeks of the pandemic, this is what we saw. When the Biden administration took office, they enacted these programs and food insecurity went back to pre-pandemic levels. And in some instances, notably now we know about child hunger, it went down because these programs work and they are the important part of what building a safety net is for. And if you don't engage and you aren't involved and you're not aware, just read the newspaper. I mean, you have to be aware before you can get engaged. And one of the things that Mazone does is do a lot of education and outreach and engagement on this. We have a big program called This is Hunger, which is about the voices of those with lived experience, sitting at a table talking to you. And it's a powerful way of really embracing the fact these are real people, that these are people you know, These are people who have worked hard, are working hard, and the circumstances of their lives have put them in a position where they just need a helping hand. And for us, that is what Jewish values are about. They are about not just tikkun olam, but B'Tselem Elohim, that we are all made in the image of God, and that we need to respect everybody and treat them with dignity and help them to be the best that they can be. This is what it means to be a Jewish organization fighting hunger in America.
Thank you, Abby. Really putting into perspective the scale of hunger in America as someone who's worked closely on hunger and food distribution for much of my career. It was really illuminating to understand what a small portion of food assistance a lot of this private food distribution is. So I'm just going to share my screen for just a moment to a slide provided by the Food Vision 2030. But so often as a public, we often really jump immediately to trying to solve the food system issues or hunger and food insecurity issues through the small slice, the private food, distributing more food. So that includes food banks, meals, senior meals, gleaning. And while this work is so critical in getting food to many people who rely on it, when we actually look at it in terms of where most meals are distributed to those in need, it's actually a very, very small percentage. And so I think that really highlights the work that that the Food System Alliance and Mazon is doing to really try and shift some of that policy on these national and local and state levels to ensure that that we have systems to continue to really support community members in need. So I want to toss it to Jessica. You know, of course, we've got kind of this duality that we're switching back and forth between this hunger issue and food waste issue. So I would love to hear a little bit more from you of what the Solana Center's role is to address these issues and how people can take actions in their life.
I am going to take a cue from Ellie and try and share. Are you all able to see my screen? Big picture of food in a dumpster from a grocery store. Yes, you can see that. So Solana Center really is about actions that we can take both now and for the future. And so we've been identifying this issue have identified this issue quite a long time ago as we were working with different businesses to help them reduce their footprint as much as possible. So as you can see, I mean, there's a lot of food that's actually going from grocery stores to currently to, you know, right into their dumpster. And what I wanted to share with you is a project that we did. We worked with In-N-Out Burger in Encinitas, where they were generating a dumpster full of inedible food waste every week. And this was the store in Encinitas. And at the same time, Jim Farley and the Leach Tag Foundation had just located at the Ecke Ranch, which was 67 acres of severely depleted soil. And they were purchasing finished compost from 25 miles away in Valley Center. And so what we did as a demonstration program was to take that food scrap. We coordinated all the parties to take that food scrap from In-N-Out Burger. This is a picture of the farmer at Leach Tag, which is now Coastal Roots Farm, and compost that material and then land apply it on the fields there. And the result was 5 times more nutrient-rich compost was created than what they'd been purchasing, a savings of over $200 a month for In-N-Out Burger. And then, of course, the climate issues of keeping the organic material from going to the landfill, as well as an issue called carbon sequestration, which actually sequesters carbon in the ground when you apply compost. So here's the actual finished compost. Looks like beautiful soil, but that's actually material made from the food scrap. And the reason this is particularly poignant right now is just yesterday, the County Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance. So this project was done as a demonstration, 6-month demonstration project in 2014-15. We were awarded the highest environmental honor from the state for having demonstrated this, but it was completely rogue. It was not allowed to actually compost material that was not generated on site. So the activity, and we knew it at the time, the activity of bringing from In-N-Out Burger to leach tag was prohibited. And so In-N-Out Burger had to go back to sending their food waste to the landfill, and leach tag had to go back to only composting material that was generated on site. But what happened yesterday is that the County Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance based on what we had demonstrated here to allow that sharing of material with the idea that it would promote composting region-wide. So what Solana Center is really aiming to do, and I'll stop sharing, just, I love pictures. I think it's much better than looking at me talking. So, but what we really aim to do is to enable these types of programs. So a lot of our programming is educating individuals, educating businesses, and supporting cities. But at the same time, these long-term demonstration projects, I mean, this was almost a decade later that this ordinance has passed, but to really prove out the concept. We have other projects in the pipeline that probably, would not, we can demonstrate them now, and it'll take another 5 years or so of actually being able to fully close the loop. But we envision a regional closed loop system when it comes to organic material. And I say organic material, which has to do with the food waste. When we go into businesses to provide inspections, we're identifying how much of that food is edible and how that business can connect with food rescue organizations. So that's always a key part. But if we don't completely close that regional loop and build self-reliance, very much aligned with the work that the Food System Alliance is doing, then we're lost. I mean, there's not a future for our children, those who are hungry today, and those who, the entire, population of the world in terms of food. And everybody's very aware of climate crisis these days. It's really become part of the regular dialogue. I hear it on the radio almost every day, where it's not a dispute anymore. The damage that we're doing to the environment has direct application or a direct consequence of the greenhouse gases that we're emitting, and any number of things. And food waste is the number one issue. Project Drawdown is a national organization that does a lot of research in this area, and it is the number one solution, or the number one area to tackle to abate the direction that we're going with global warming. So I will turn it back to you, and I'm not even sure that I answered your specific question. If I didn't, please pose it back to me.
That was great, Jessica. Thank you. We're nearing the last 10 minutes, so I want to encourage any of the participants to pose some questions in the chat or in the Q&A. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask the panelists, a key takeaway that I'm hearing from a lot of this discussion is what a large role government policy systems change have in solving these issues of food waste and hunger. So what is the role of philanthropy and individual donors in changing these issues? Abby, would you like to start?
Yes, I will start. I've actually had this conversation in Los Angeles before, which is that there's a, I would say there's been a shift slightly in the philanthropic community around a willingness to fund organizations that engage in policy work and advocacy work. I think that there's a need to ensure that philanthropy isn't solely focused on individuals and the needs of individuals, but also looks at some of the systemic change and as a way and as a vehicle to have a broader based impact. And that there's a shift happening in philanthropy generally anyway, especially as we see extraordinarily wealthy individuals making remarkably large, let's call them investments, I don't know what they call them, in individual nonprofits, which is a sea change. I don't really have an opinion one way or another about that, other than I have to recognize that that is happening, that there is a responsibility for all of us to make the world better for those for whom it is not good. So we really are serious about the idea of tikkun olam and about repairing the world. And that's what our work is. It is to repair the world and what is broken. And if the system is broken, it is about investing in those that are trying to change the system, to heal that system. And it isn't as if one precludes the other. It's important to address those who have a need now to make certain that they are taken care of. But our obligation is about making sure there are no more people who end up in those circumstances, that we do everything we can to move upstream and say, how is this happening? What can we do so that we no longer are standing downstream trying to rescue people one after the other? So I have a firm belief in both. And I run an organization that is really designed about system change because I'm a person who gets deeply affected by what's happening to individuals, which means that I'm not a good advocate and a good person to engage in direct service because it consumes me too much. And because I then become frustrated by seeing the same people with the same challenges. And I need to change that. I've spent my entire career about trying to change that. And in Mazone, what we say is that if we work together, all aspects of our society, which we think are very linked, including the philanthropic sector, then we will be able to change how it is to how it should be.
Thank you, Abby. Jessica?
Yes, it's an excellent question. As much of the type of programming that we do is very dependent on impact first type of funding, risk tolerant funding. The work that we did with In and Out to Leach Tag was self-funded, but following that, we had a lot of visionary funders who wanted to be part of these types of solutions. But if you can imagine, we've been working on that program for, the program was 6 months and then 8 years of agitating to allow that. And the next step that we want to take is really regional, as I said. And can you imagine the next step being all of our local grocery stores in the San Diego area? We're so fortunate to live in this unique environment where we have year-round growing seasons, and we also have the largest number of farms of any county in the United States. And so we do have very close proximity. The In and Out burger to Leach Tag, that was less than a mile away. And so we envision a regional closed loop system where we're taking from those grocery stores that are sourcing from local farmers that then give back that full dumpster. In that first picture I had, that full dumpster of inedible food goes back to the local farms and is composted there to regenerate the soil. And so we really are dependent on funding from visionary grants and individuals. The last thing I'll say is that we have seen, and this is really to, I think your core question is about food waste and investment in it. There is an organization called ReFed, and it's only the last couple years that it has really exploded, but it is very well funded. They put aside $100 million now for funding solutions to food waste there, and that's to kickstart their estimate that $14 billion a year of investment is needed in food solutions to be able to get us to that 50% reduction in food waste by 2030, which is a national goal. It's based on global goals as well. So, but that $14 billion a year of investment is expected to provide benefits, not just environmental, but financial benefits as well. So, as I said, we are supported very much by visionary funders, and a lot of that funding also goes to supporting underserved communities. We have nice corporate grants to give to provide funding for our solutions in underserved communities, Native American communities that we have around the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessica. I'm going to pass it to Ellie for just the last minute or two to share a little bit on this.
Yeah, really building upon Abby and Jessica's points, really being open to resourcing structural work that is not gonna be an immediate like number of pounds, number of people fed type of work. And it's really work for future generations. So being open to funding both the symptom of current society and the structural transformation work that's needed, as well as really centering trust in relationships in this work and being with the community. It's not like nonprofits and foundations or nonprofit philanthropy kind of separately. It is together we can make these changes happen. So being open to different ways of building relationships.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, panelists. I'm going to pass it back to Ollie to close us out.
Wow. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Abby. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, Ellie, who literally has been running to and from a conference. And I'm really grateful that you managed to make it here in the middle of your schedule. So thank you. But thank you guys all so much. And lastly, thank you to Aviva for taking what was a slightly abstract and a difficult topic to weave together and really like doing a wonderful job of moderating and trying to thread that needle. And I think we've all learned a lot today. So thank you very, very much, Aviva, and thank you to our panelists. We'll be sending out links with information about all of our speakers today, as well as upcoming Give4 and the other initiatives that we've mentioned. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for attending, and we hope to see you at the next session. Thank you so much.